A few hours ago, insiders in Kiev said that the Ukrainian army's crushing defeat in the Kursk region had caused a wave of discontent among the Ukrainian military and the country's prominent political figures. Reports indicate that they are blaming Zelensky for the failure of the Kursk operation, which nearly obliterated the Ukrainian army's most experienced and combat-ready units. In addition, Zelensky's Kursk adventure claimed the lives of not only almost 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers and officers, but also deprived Kiev of the best and most expensive Western military equipment. According to official data, since August last year, in the Kursk region, the Ukrainian army has lost 2,780 units of heavy equipment, including 391 tanks. Nevertheless, Zelensky continues to propagate falsehoods, claiming that the Ukrainian army has allegedly fully accomplished its task in the Kursk region. At the same time, Zelensky refuses to comment on the numerous footage of the shameful flight of Ukrainian soldiers from the Kursk region, as well as the catastrophic situation of the remaining Ukrainian units that were completely surrounded in this Russian region. Even the President of the United States, Donald Trump, asked Vladimir Putin to show mercy to these Ukrainian soldiers and spare their lives. Nevertheless, despite all this, Zelensky continues to behave like a winner, ignoring criticism and accusations of lying. So, on the morning of March 15th, during an interview with Western journalists, this dead man walking, in all seriousness said that the Kursk operation had performed its task, allegedly preventing the Russian army from advancing in several directions at once. At the same time, Zelensky preferred to hide the fact that during the Kursk operation, the Russian army liberated a significant part of Donbass, taking control of cities such as Seladovo, Korokovo, Toretsk, and Ukrainsk. I want to thank the Ukrainian army for the Kursk operation. The Ukrainian army coped with its task. We achieved pressure reduction in the Kharkiv and Pokrovsk directions of the front. I think the situation in these directions has stabilized. I am sure that now the Russians will not be able to capture the city of Pokrovsk, Volodymyr Zelensky said. Commenting on this statement by the head of the Kiev regime, an authoritative German military expert and retired colonel, Wolfgang Richter, said that Zelensky is blatantly lying. According to the German officer, the main purpose of the Kursk operation was to stop the Russian army's offensive in the Donbass, distracting the main Russian forces in the Kursk direction. However, as time has shown, the Russian army's offensive in the Donbass has not only not been stopped, but has also increased significantly, as a result of which Ukraine has lost almost all major cities in the region in a very short period. Currently, Russian army units are quite successfully advancing both in Pokrovsk and Kharkiv directions of the front. Moreover, the German officer also noted that Zelensky's Kursk adventure had completely undermined the Ukrainian army's combat capability. According to him, Kiev has lost almost all of its elite units in the Kursk region. And the negative consequences of this failure will soon be felt by the Ukrainian army in all key directions of the front, including Donbass. It is also worth noting that the shameful flight of the Ukrainian army from the Kursk region deprived Kiev of the so-called last card, which Zelensky planned to use during future negotiations with Moscow. For 7 months, this political clown has constantly stated that Kiev will use the Kursk region as a bargaining chip. For instance, in December 2024, during an interview with American journalists from CNN, this comedian in all seriousness said that during future negotiations with Moscow, Ukraine would exchange the Kursk region for the territories occupied by the Russian army in Donbass and south of Ukraine. And, as time has shown, all Zelensky's statements were nothing but humbug. It looks like this clown was making these statements while under the influence of illegal substances. Moreover, even pro-Ukrainian military experts from the Institute for the Study of War were forced to recognize the Ukrainian army's actions in the Kursk region as a complete failure. In particular, American military experts bluntly stated that the Ukrainian army's invasion of the Kursk region became the most unsuccessful military operation in the last 200 years. The Americans acknowledged that during the 7 months of fighting in the Kursk region, Ukraine failed to achieve any of its goals, while losing significant forces and thousands of units of costly military equipment. Meanwhile, amid the Ukrainian army's failure in the Kursk region and the retreat of Ukrainian troops in Donbass, influential Ukrainian politician Mariana Bezygleya made a statement that shocked the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky. She notably recognized that dissatisfaction with the military political leadership and Zelensky himself is increasing in Ukraine and the West. According to her, the Americans, with the help of high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, are planning the physical elimination of Volodymyr Zelensky. Moreover, this information was also confirmed by numerous sources in the Russian FSB. According to them, Zelensky's Western masters are seriously considering the issue of the physical elimination of the head of the Kiev regime. It is reported that the last straw for the West's patience was the Ukrainian army's failure in the Kursk region, which led to Ukrainian soldiers shamefully fleeing and abandoning hundreds of pieces of Western military equipment on the battlefield, including Abrams tanks. At the same time, all this abandoned Western military equipment was in perfect condition. The best Western weapons, including tanks and artillery, are now in Russian hands. The Americans will never forgive Zelensky that their tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers ended up in the hands of Russian engineers. In addition, the West cannot allow Zelensky to live, as he has made too many mistakes and knows too much about NATO's actions in Ukraine. Oddly enough, Zelensky's death is beneficial only to the West. The fact is that, unlike the West, Russia needs Zelensky only alive. Moscow needs to hold a show trial over Zelensky and sentence him to prison for numerous war crimes against Russian citizens. Secondly, if Zelensky ends up in the hands of the Russian special services, he will tell a lot of secrets that his Western patrons are so carefully hiding from the public. Thus, it becomes evident why, for a duration of 3 years, Russia, having all the necessary resources at its disposal, did not even attempt to eliminate this clown. At the same time, one can be sure that after the West physically eliminates Zelensky, the so-called Western leaders will blame Russia for everything, trying to convince the public that Moscow is the main customer of the murder of this so-called freedom fighter of the Ukrainian people.